Jet Airways is having its swings in the session today. And like I said, it's become a classic speculative trade for the markets as, rumors are rife on whether a deal is in the making or not. So who better than Jitendra Bhargava, former ED Air India, and Dhiraj Mathur, partner and leader, Aerospace Defence, PwC, join us this morning to put things in perspective. Good morning to both of you. Mr. Bhargava, let me start off with you first. How are you seeing this deal development? It just seems like there are too many options up in the air, but nothing seems very conclusive just as yet.
See, to say that there are too many options, I wouldn't agree with it. The reality is Jet has been pushed to the wall with the kind of finances that it have. And as I've often analyzed it, it's the market dynamics that is a deterrent. As a full-service carrier with India as a price-sensitive market, the low-cost carriers are gaining at the expense of full-service carriers. And it's not just for Jet Airways, it's true for Air India as well and Vistara. So when we look at it from this swing, where is the hope that you will be able to recover the cost of producing a seat? Because the moment you increase fares, it has an effect on the growth. And Indigo particularly, and with all airlines having ordered 1,000 aircraft due for induction, how can they be reducing their market share? They're unlikely to do anything to affect their market share because that will hamper their growth strategies. So fares are unlikely to go up. Good for the passenger's perspective, bad from the airline, particularly Jet and full service carrier. Now, when you look at the options, they've tried Tata's, they've tried Etihad, who already hold for 24% equity. Now, let's go back into 5 years ago when it happened. 24% equity, 800 rupees a share. That time they managed that, okay, SEBI will not insist on offering the same rate to the other shareholders, for others. Now, can you do it? Let's not forget, you had a very, very favorable government in 2012-13. Unlikely now, of course, the government will also not like any carrier to fold up so close to the elections, etc. That's a safeguard. But for Jet to get funds easily, it's not a possibility. Banks, after the Kingfisher experience, will be extra cautious. They're not going to be, and there will be questioned, let's put it this way. Once you can be forgiven for being silly.
No, even with this restructuring program or a haircut, do you think there would be a problem?
You see, question is, why will somebody put in money? You put in money in the hope that my principal is safe and I'm going to generate some surplus. Now, as I said, you can put in money. So the kind of conditions, A, the banks are putting, B, Etihad or any other lender will be putting in, they'll make the task very difficult. And when you calculate, considering the FDI rule of 49% equity that a foreign entity can hold, now you are looking at 25%. And if you want to offer a price, that time 800 came in, please, I was one of those critics and went to Compat as well for it. That was accompanied with a lakhs per week seats to Abu Dhabi sector. That was a side kind of an agreement worked out with the government. Yeah. Now this time when it's a pure equity kind of a thing, what valuation would you get? So it's not going to be a huge money that Jet will manage to get with the 25% equity stake. So it's going to find some other way of survival. We wish them good luck. The reality is we don't want it. It's needed. But the business model has to be tweaked, number one. Market dynamics, it's beyond anybody's control. It's wishful thinking, must change, and airlines must be able to at least recover the cost of producing a seat, which unfortunately is not happening.
Okay, point taken, absolutely. But tell me, I mean, to begin with, does Etihad seem like the best fit to take over Jet? Because they themselves are bleeding, right? Where will they cough up that kind of money to try and rescue Jet?
You know, one peculiar phenomenon of the Gulf carriers has been that they've gone in for expansion irrespective of the costs.
Yeah.
So they have been expanding. So as I said earlier, last time when they got into this agreement, acquired 24% equity, they also got from Ajit Singh as the civil aviation minister, 1 lakh seats, 50,000 for India and 50,000 for... So when you have that kind of a thing proposition, they could see business potential coming. Indian carriers from 23 cities being flown to Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi flying the Indian passengers to Europe and United States. So they had some positive gains. But what do they have at the moment? That kind of a venue is virtually not there, with Air India particularly launching non-stop flights. And US carriers also launching non-stop flights. You don't need an intermediate point. So there are a lot of negatives if we look at in today's scenario for Jet vis-a-vis what it was in 2012-13 for them.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about that point, but let's bring in Dhiraj as well into the discussion. Dhiraj, what kind of resolution plan, that's a debt rejig or an equity infusion, would you deem the right way forward for Jet?
Obviously, the equity infusion is essential. That's the best thing to happen, and I don't think the bankers would be willing to accept a restructuring of the debt without some fresh equity coming into the company.
Right. And what would you say are the key challenges that constrain Jet right now?
I think the principal challenge is the debt overhang. That is the biggest problem, that they're having difficulty in servicing their debt. Now look, last year was a bad year for the entire industry. I mean, almost every airline suffered losses in the last year, largely on account of the high ATF. So this is what has really exacerbated matters for the airlines. In the previous year, there were quarters when it had also made money, and like others did. So last year was a bad year, and that's where I think the problems started snowballing.
Right, Mr. Bhargava, let's come back to the point where you said, nobody wants this airline to go under because it doesn't serve any purpose, right? And the government would also be keen that some resolution is reached. What can the government do in this regard? I mean, is there any sort of intervention, active intervention that can come in?
You see, they wouldn't like to do it publicly. It will raise all kinds of things. A, you've got Air India, which is your own carrier.
That's right.
You're not being able to do much to it. What kind of benefits can you extend or concessions you can make? It could be very limited kind of, as I said, the scope is rather limited at this juncture. But the reality is, Jet Airways, from what it was as the first private sector airline to have survived these 25 years, you have been growing. And the fact is, 6 months before, if you recall, they had issued a notice that there will be a trimming of wages, salaries for pilots and others. And they rolled it back under opposition. So the writing was on the wall that Jet Airways is facing a crisis. Now, it's a typical government way of functioning, though it's a private entity, that it failed to read the writing on the wall, that something major is going to happen, you'll get into a crisis. So it allowed itself to be pushed to the wall, coming to a situation where you have a crisis on hand and you do not know what to do with it.
But can the government be the arbitrator between the banks as well as Jet Airways? I mean, is that something that can be worked out?
Is the government willing to have an accusing finger at them later that there was phone banking, as Prime Minister Modi used the term phone banking, that phone calls used to go to the banks for giving loans, etc. Will he be allowing himself to be guilty of the same thing? Yeah. People are going to be turning back and saying, look, you did this. And with the kind of media that we have, I don't think banks will take a chance. They were virtually forgiven, I would say, in the case of Kingfisher. Yes, but by having accepted those king of good times, etc., as collaterals, etc., it's very unlikely that they're going to do it this time.
No, but my only follow-up there is that, you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place. The other option is that you let the airline go, which is also something that nobody wants.
See, I have, maybe because I've known Mr. Naresh Goyal for a long time, he is a man with multiple lives. Let me explain to you. This time, everything is going against him. Now, one cannot see that, look, this is an avenue open. I've been saying it very clearly. Etihad is the best bet. But the fact is, as she very rightly said, they are also not in a very comfortable position. But the kind of concessions that they managed to get in the previous occasion when they acquired 24% equity, they cannot get it anymore. So there is no concession. It's going to be hard business economics for them and say, this is the value that I get and this is what the benefit I must get. And you cannot see any benefit on the horizon.
So worst case scenario, what are we looking at for Jet Airways?
I don't think even Mr. Goyal will have an answer to it at the moment. We can only try and hope for the best, something to emerge, some concessions to come in. So if you have minor concessions, the question to be asked is, will it be a sustainable solution? You can ride over the crisis for the next 4 or 5 months. Okay, the banks can say, okay, don't repay us, we can defer those repayments for the time being, but that's a minor concession. But lessors, aircraft, what happens to them? Employees, look at the demoralization that sets in, and with other carriers growing, you only get marginalized, and once your marginalization takes place, value erosion takes place. So it's the same repeat of an Air India story, put it this way.
Yeah, Air India is flying, so I guess Jet Airways would have some flights going despite all the mess that it's stuck in. Dhiraj, maybe we can wrap up by asking you very quickly about, just the options which are being evaluated on the table. I know that the whole Tata thing is still part of the rumor mills, but the top priority areas for Etihad or banks, how do you qualify that? Because they are the ones who are going to get in the equity. Do you think that it would really provide stabilization and revival as one would expect it? What's the game looking like going forward?
Well, I guess it would be substantially the slow and steady turnaround, but there may be a couple of major decisions that might need to be taken and implemented very quickly.
Yeah, let's hope so. The stock is down 5% at 278. Let's see what kind of solution can be worked out in the wake of this mini crisis, so to speak, before it unfolds into a big one. Thanks very much, Mr. Bhargav, as well as Dhiraj, for joining us with your take on this burning issue.